Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? Hi, I'm Nathan Mercero, CEO of Planning Alternatives. We're a disruptive brand in the financial planning space with a point of view that true wealth has nothing to do with money. Growing up in a small town in Canada, I experienced examples of families with money and without. It started me on this journey of understanding wealth and the idea that spending a day in a canoe with someone could be one of the best investments you could make. Join me as I sit down with leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, rule breakers, and friends to discover their perspective of true wealth. And maybe you'll start to shift yours. I'm delighted today to spend time with Dr. Joe Hunstad. Joe is a true leader in the aesthetics industry. He's an inventor of unique surgical operations. He's an author. He's an internationally acclaimed speaker, a former director of the Aesthetic Society and past president of HKB Cosmetic Plastic Surgery. Joe, welcome to Day in a Canoe. Would
Thank
love
you.
to hear about your background because you have a fascinating background and you've really made an impact on a lot of people. Where did it all start and what are some of the highlights?
Well, it went all the way back to eighth grade, believe it or not. And we had a career day in eighth grade. And I first thought I wanted to be an airline pilot because it sounded exciting, but my vision wasn't that good. And I realized that wouldn't work. So oceanography was number two, but I had a lot of allergies. The job market appeared to be not very good. And revenue looked poor. It was just really a challenge. So my third choice was I think I could be a physician. So beginning in eighth grade, I said, I'm going to be a doctor. And that was my total focus from then until I became one until today. And when I went to college, I was dedicated to pre med and went through the classic, um, terribly competitive program. I went to Kalamazoo College, a small liberal arts school, and I went there because they had, according to them, the highest percentage of putting people into medical school. But ironically, as I found out there, the reason that is because the advisors were heavily discouraging anybody that they didn't think was going to make the cut. So, it was just one of those things, but I was very fortunate and I was able to get accepted to med school first time around and loved medical school, loved every day of medical school, frankly. And when I was in medical school, I decided, okay, you've got to make a choice between the medical kind of life and the surgical kind of life. And I was always mechanically oriented and inclined to be perhaps more aggressive and, stronger personality. Surgery was the place for me. When I was in high school, I had received some pretty bad burnings on my hands and other things. And I was very interested in burn surgery. So in medical school, I did a rotation in my third year on the burn unit, which nobody did because it was really, really hot and really hard. But I really enjoyed it. Matter of fact, so much that I did a second month. And the first day of my next month, the head of the burn unit, who was ironically a plastic surgeon, said, Hunstad, you're here again. I said, yeah, well, yes, sir. He goes, well, you've got the unit going great. Everything's good. You can come down and operate with me today. And honestly, I thought in the back of my mind, he's a plastic surgeon. I was like, oh, that's for wimps. That's not for me. But that day, we took care of a complex hand injury. We treated a child with a cleft lip deformity and did a cosmetic procedure. It was it. And I was absolutely absolutely dedicated to plastic surgery from that moment on. And I've got to tell you a little story, which is kind of funny. I did a month rotation in the Grand Rapids residency program. They accepted me there and I went through that program. And after I'd been out in practice a number of years, I was starting to present new things that we developed. And at one meeting, I was literally coming down from the podium and in the front row was Dr. Frank Newman, the plastic surgeon who invited me to operate with him when I was a medical student. And it was so great. It was like, Joe, you've really come a long way. And well, thanks to you, Dr. Newman. So that was pretty amazing for me. That was really great. Yeah.
I think that aha moment that you described is something that we all search for in terms of knowing that we found the spot that we're really called to. How do you advise other people, whether in the medical profession or people in life, around finding their calling or that aha moment? What insight might you offer on that front?
So, medicine still is, in my opinion, a great field, although it's changed dramatically and it's not the medicine that I grew up in. The residency programs, uh, the requirements on the residents have really been toned down. There's a lot more sensitivity and things like this. It was pretty brutal during a general surgery residency. I mean, you were treated like pretty much a low dog, and that's just the way it was. And you just dealt with it. But I still think medicine is great. I don't think that that aha moment doesn't come for everybody. I remember when we were sitting around as the in our fourth year, and we received our match information where we were to do our residency. And I remember there were a number of my classmates that I can tell you they were not committed to any one thing, and they didn't match. And then they were really scrambling trying to find something. So hopefully they did over time. But for those that clicks, go for it. And the one thing I would say that um, when you're a college student and you're met with adversity, and perhaps you're a pre med and the other pre med students are incredibly cutthroat and demeaning, just hang in there and go for it, because that's what I experienced. And I just moved ahead and tried to kind of push that to the side and not deal with it. So I think
That's good insight. I think there's a lot of times when we hit resistance and we just say, hey, let's find another avenue. But having a clarity of vision, a commitment, it takes time, it takes disciplines. As the saying goes, it takes 20 years to be overnight success. I think there's a lot of uh, lot of things that go on in the background, but at the end of the day, it's about purpose. It's about having a sense of purpose and passion with what we do with our time and energy, and that's a key message that we talk about and help people align their resources to fulfill that purpose and passion. Swinging back to your career track, what else evolved after you had that moment with Dr. Newman, and how did your career evolve?
it was interesting that most plastic surgeons in the late 80s, early 90s had uh, a practice that was primarily reconstructive insurance-based surgery with a modest percentage that was cosmetic. But after 2 years in practice, my practice just automatically converted by itself. And I loved doing aesthetic surgery, but it became almost purely aesthetic surgery within 2 years, which is really interesting. And I started to see a lot of patients, because I was very aggressive, who had massive weight loss and wanted surgery to treat these terrible excess redundant rolls and folds of skin and this and that. And so I started to do procedures known as a body lift, or a circumferential all the way around body removal of extra skin and fat, with some dramatic results. As a matter of fact, I was presenting my experience with and no one was doing this procedure. It was very, very rare. And the head of the Royal Society of Surgery of Belgium, the first woman to be that, Dr. Madeleine Lejour, was in the audience, saw me present this, and literally, it was amazing. As soon as I was done and sat down, she literally came up on the stage and said, "You must come to Brussels and do this for us." So I said, "Okay, I will." I had never been invited to do anything like that. And so they flew me over to Brussels in front of all the residents and the fellows and all the attendings. And I did a body lift in Brussels. And that was my first live surgery outside of my comfort zone in my own ORs. And it went really well. And that was kind of the beginning of things. And I became pretty well known for these very aggressive care for these massive weight loss patients. And through that, I had been invited then. I think I did surgery in 27 countries, believe it or not. And it was always great. And to be invited to do that for me was a great honor. I've always thought it was a great honor to be a plastic surgeon. I'll tell you that. And the first sentence in my acknowledgement in the textbook that I wrote was, "It is an honor to be a plastic surgeon." And I truly believe that. And I'm grateful that I was accepted into that residency program and then could teach residents and fellows. And we had, I've trained more than 40 fellows from all over the world. I mean, from people, places like Bogota, Colombia, Reykjavik, Iceland, Sweden, Italy, and then of course throughout the United States. And I've got this big family of the fellows that I've shared, my knowledge with, and they've grown because of that. So pretty neat.
You've made a tremendous impact on not only your patients' lives, but the community at large. And you've really been a leader. When you look at that timeline, besides Dr. Newman, any people or any situations that stand out that help define your life trajectory or any lessons learned within that?
I was really fortunate to get to know and meet many of the real leaders in plastic surgery that I had read about, had learned about, and that became friends with. And two of the greats, Dr. Guerrero Santos from Mexico and Ricardo Baruti from Brazil, I asked them to write forwards to my textbook, and they graciously agreed to do that. And for me, that was just absolutely wonderful. I mean, I got to know the Gerardo Luz, the person who invented liposuction, Fred Grazer in the U.S., considered the father of body contouring, Ivo Patangue in Brazil, the worldwide father of body contouring, and it was just such a wonderful opportunity to contribute, and yet then gain all that information and gain all those friendships. When I was in Houston and I did a fellowship after my residency, an extra year that I didn't need to do, but it was the best training year I ever had. And one of my mentors there, Dr. Spira, he ran the residency program at the Methodist in Houston. And he said, "Joe, you've got to contribute." And I said, "Yes, sir, Dr. Spira, I will." And then subsequently, I've seen him, and he goes, "You've contributed." I went, "Thank you." Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Now, as you've evolved in your life, you've also made a transition into retirement, and that's been a new lane that you're exploring. Tell us about what you're focused on at this new stage.
So it was interesting that I was challenged by many of my friends, colleagues, and patients that said, "There's no way you can quit this. This is your life. You can't." And I went, "Yeah, I can quit this." And thanks to planning alternatives, you allowed me the financial freedom to do this, frankly. And I literally went from 100% to zero because I had and have a lot of outside interests. I mean, I've got a very busy YouTube channel, Adventures with Dr. Joe, that began as a forum to present the surgical procedures that I'd created, and I would give a teaching course. And then I said, before you do this procedure, please go back and review this because they were very detailed, and that way you'll get it right. You won't make any mistakes. And that's where it began. And then I just did all the things that I do, and I repair things and I fix things and I describe things and I demonstrate things. And now I've gotten into 3D printing, which is pretty excellent. I'm enjoying that. But I also we're fortunate we've got a mountain property in North Carolina where I do some hobby farming. I have a tractor, I plow the fields, I plant, fertilize, do those things. And I just enjoy doing those kind of things. So I had a lot of outside activities before I retired, which I think is important. And before you retire, and I'm actually giving a presentation on preparing for retirement. Um, in July, we have a aesthetic cruise every other year, and I'm on the faculty giving my perspective. And one of the big points I'm trying to make is picture yourself in retirement and be prepared for that by having other activities and interests that you've begun, you've developed, that you can then transition into, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of disappointment and feelings of loss, which are common in early retirement. And it's important to be able to go beyond that and reach the next phase that you can truly enjoy yourself.
We work with and we know of a number of physicians that have had phenomenal careers, but have really struggled making the transition to not being entrenched in those careers. What you shared was good advice on just having a diversity of options. What do you see in people's mindset though? Because sometimes it seems like it's just a really hard transition to move from that career. And whether it's a medical career, it could be an executive, it could be a high achiever. Like, how do people cross the bridge from, hey, I'm consumed in work to work has moved on and I need to reinvent my life?
So in preparing for my presentation, I've listened to tons of podcasts. I've read a lot of articles about that, and there's a very consistent pattern in this. The first year of retirement or so, most people just view it as a vacation, and almost everybody can handle that. But then that the luster fades and people start to experience the five losses, the loss of power, loss of relationships at work, loss of meaning, you know, and you've got to then focus on other activities, other passions, other interests that you can move into so you can progress beyond that. Because if you don't, you there's an increase in divorce, in depression, in suicide, other things like that. That this consumes you if you can't break out of it and move ahead. So that's an important transition point that everybody really needs to make to move into that more fulfilling world. And it's interesting that many times one of the things that people find most fulfilling is actually giving back, volunteering, donating your time and your knowledge and your expertise to helping other people. And honestly, one of the things that my YouTube channel does, it allows me to do that. And I love more than anything else the comments that come back say, "Oh, thank you so much. You now I can do this. I can fix that thing, or I understand how this works." I mean, that for me is great.
For listeners, please go to YouTube and type in Adventures with Dr. Joe, and you'll be delighted to discover a library of helpful tips. It's not on how to do plastic surgery, it's how to put a drill bit in a drill and fix things. Which I think, Joe, one of your gifts is making complicated things simple. You've invented procedures, you've invented instruments, but they've all been to simplify a very complex process. And it seems to be that's what you're continuing with your hobby of Adventures with Dr. Joe.
Yeah, when there was a huge transition of liposuction in the very early 90s, 91, 92, because previously it required the patients to auto donate blood in order to have liposuction because it was such a large blood loss procedure. It was unbelievable. You had a unit of blood needed for a liter of fat, 2 units of blood for a liter and a half of fat. Well, suddenly this concept of putting large volumes of this dilute lidocaine adrenaline fluid into the fat reduced blood loss by 90%. And today, getting a transfusion after liposuction is vanishingly rare because you can do it so safely. But at the time, there was no instruments out there to do this. So I developed with one of the medical companies this instrument line. It's called the Hunstad system. And ironically, it's gone through a number of modifications and improvements, but it's still probably the most popular system used worldwide. I remember when I did life surgery in Saudi Arabia, and we shipped some of our instruments over there. They didn't make it, but the plastic surgeon in the hospital there had all my stuff, so he was already there. It was pretty cool. Yeah.
It's a great story. So, looking back at life, what advice would you give a 20-year-old Joe, given that you've had such a prolific career and amazing insights and lessons learned along the way?
Well, I've been very fortunate, and I'm very grateful. I tell you, for me, I'm very fortunate. I have an incredibly strong, wonderful wife who has stood by me, during a lot of difficulties. I'm not an easy person. I'm not always that easy person to get along with and be. I'm pretty demanding of myself and others, and she helps me kind of go, you got to back off on that. I think she helps me with that. And she and I have two absolutely wonderful daughters. Matter of fact, we had a big dinner last night. They all came over. With other friends too. They love bringing their friends to our house. It's great. So as a 20-year-old Joe, so I'm in the middle of college and I'm depressed because these the big gunners, other pre-med students are, I don't know, I'm looking at them as, gosh, you're better than me. I don't know. Just hang with it. Ignore all that other noise. Focus on yourself. Be the very best you can be, and be true to yourself. And when you really have a desire to do something, go ahead and go get it. And it was funny because when I applied to medical school, I did not have a backup plan. I was going to take that leap off that bridge, and I was going to make the other side. And I was fortunate that I did. I did not have a safety net. So that's me.
Well, it's good when choices are clear because we know what to do. Joe, I want to thank you for your time and sharing your insight on Dana Canoe. It's been a pleasure getting to know you over the years and working together. And I wish you all the best in the next chapter of your life.
Thank you very much for this invitation. It was great.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. To discover what wealth means to you, please take our assessment at planningalt.com.